At long last, I've obtained one of my quest pieces.
Welcome home, Great Slayer.
Against all the evil McFarlane can conjure, all the wickedness that Hasbro can produce, we will review instead of them only you. Rip and tear until it is done.
Doom. If you haven't heard of this franchise before,
Why are you gay?
these aren't just mere video games. These are therapy. Hours upon hours of obliterating hell's most vicious demons in the most violent and satisfying ways possible. Accompanied by a legendary metal soundtrack and the biggest damn guns we could find. In these games, you don't fight the boss fights you. If you can't tell, gang, I love these games more than life itself. What's also really cool is in Eternal, the second Hell Priest is voiced by Jason Spisak, who also voices Silco in Arcane, and Nika Futterman voices the Con Maker, better known for her role as Ventress in the Clone Wars. Not that that has anything to do with this review, but...
I just think it's neat.
Anyway, of all the Doom games, Doom Eternal is probably my favorite, and I've wanted some figures from that game pretty much since it came out. Unfortunately, however, options are limited. McFarlane makes the most quantity, and by that I mean like 2 figures released in 50 different colors as usual, and every version except this one has the super shotgun, because why not?
Gross.
I mean, I guess they also made the classic skin of Doom Guy from Eternal inspired by the 90s games, which the gold label version glows in the dark, but so? It'll still be garbage, it's McFarlane toys. All they know how to make is garbage.
Did we have to go to that tone already? You start off so nice.
Look, alright, I'm sorry, okay?
Another option is the Mondo 1/6 scale one, which looks pretty nice, but it's a little out of my price range, and I prefer 12th scale. But there is another option, from a Japanese import company known as Figma, and it is neat.
The Slayer's time is now.
Here he is, gang. Behold, the testosterone-fueled demon-obliterating rage machine, the Doom Slayer. My first impressions for this figure are... I really wasn't sure what to expect from this one, to be honest. This was my first non-anime figure from Figma, and when I got the first of those, they were much smaller than I expected. But even though Figma figures are non-scale, the Slayer here seems pretty close to 1/12, which is nice. Upon first opening the box, I was greeted by quite a violent brand new stereo smell. Smelled kinda like Branzy Newsy plastic, super glue, and a touch of isopropyl alcohol, but mixed with antifreeze.
Brutal.
Sculpt and paint apps are very detailed and looks pretty game accurate. From all the overlapping armor plating on the Praetor suit, to the tread on the bottom of his boots, the veins in the tree trunks he calls arms, and the best helmet likeness recreation I've seen next to Mondo's. Figma absolutely nailed the teal fade effect on the visor. And as if that wasn't enough, they even went as far to add the Slayer rune symbol, which I really wasn't expecting since it's so small. The competition just phoned that part in. What is that even supposed to be?
Ew.
The articulation for the Slayer is pretty good, especially considering he's an absolute tank. Things here are pretty standard for an import, very smooth joints that glide into place, though I did notice a few joints have some sticking or stiffness, but some light oil should sort that out. Although he's quite solid and reasonably heavy, he is one of the more fragile imports I've come across. Also, this happens while posing sometimes. Don't worry, his arms aren't broken, but oh boy, the sphincter pucker I got the first time this happened. The articulated knee and elbow armor also seem delicate, but the most fragile part is definitely the shoulder cannon. I've seen a few people accidentally break this while posing it, so it requires some care when fiddling with. Of course, it doesn't help that it moves weird either, so that's probably part of it. It does articulate like in the game with a series of swivel joints, which granted is pretty cool. But it doesn't work real well, and feels like the joints could shatter if even slightly moved wrong.
I'll be careful.
But overall, the articulation is great. Pretty much any pose you can imagine the Slayer in this figure can pull it off. It helps that certain armor sections articulate as well. And, for the record, the shoulder armor articulation was done far better than what Figuarts did on their Stormtrooper. In that video I said that figure's shoulder bells are finicky and get in the way, which is true, and I've come to hate them even more since then. But the Figma Slayer was done much better, because they're attached by a simple dumbbell joint, which works near flawlessly, instead of a hinge at the bottom and a ball at the top, which get in the way more than aid motion range. A simple case of overcomplicating something that isn't that complicated. His knee and elbow joints also move further than you'd think, considering each are about as thick as a regular action figure's head. The most limited joints would be the ankles, even with the articulated armor plate, and the right wrist with the extended forearm armor. Now, articulation is nice and very important, but Doom isn't exactly about ballet dancing. It's about 1,000 different ways to decimate the forces of hell, which means...
Guns.
Starting off with a certified classic, the Super Shotgun. Very nice likeness to the weapon's appearance in Doom Eternal, which you acquire in the game by swapping bodies with a fucking Revenant, but instead of saying thank you, you simply blast his face off.
Metal.
The meat hook on the Super Shotgun looks great. I just wish this was an interchangeable piece with an extended one that had a real chain attached to it for display purposes, but I guess that would be kinda pointless because they didn't make any demons for him to fight.
Oh no.
Also, not sure why they didn't paint the inside of the barrels black or just drill them out further. This just looks weird, like a pair of binoculars or Wall-E or something. The other gun included with this figure is the BFG 9000.
You can't just shoot a hole into the surface of Mars.
Are you threatening me?
Not really much to say here other than it's a solid plastic great big Jesus gun with some green glow effects on it. It's definitely necessary for the Slayer to have this, but it was never my favorite weapon in Doom, so I personally won't use this that much. Along with these two guns, you get the bringer of ammo, the chainsaw, and perhaps the most powerful weapon in his arsenal, the Crucible Blade, both of which are very well detailed and painted. Also note how the ancient writing on the blade itself is actually molded in the plastic. To hold these epic weapons of mortally challenged pest control, he comes with 11 extra hands. These hands include a pair of fists, open hands, various trigger hands, various gripping hands, and a thumbs up. Plus they included this tray to organize all the extra hands with their corresponding numbers when you're not using them. They also give you an extra wrist peg just in case, an opposite arm piece for the shoulder cannon so it looks like it does when deployed in the game, and a big arse version of a classic Figma stand. Plus an interchangeable, extended or retracted arm blade for slicing and dicing. I think the accessories Figma included are all pretty good, so I have no complaints on that end. However, I wish he had more than just two guns, since that's kinda one of the whole points of Doom. So let's give him some more guns!
Of course! It's so simple!
Now, if you watched my first video on G.I. Joe Classified, you may recall what I said about the Cobra Infantry Soldier's rifle. You may ask, why'd you replace it? What's wrong with it? I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It's stupid, that's what's wrong with it. It looks way too futuristic and sci-fi-esque to fit in with a Cobra soldier. It actually looks more like something the Doom Slayer would use. Well, turns out I was right! What looked dumb with its intended figure fits right in with this one. Even more so if you give it a little paint to make it feel a little more UAC-esque. Another Joe gun that suits the Slayer was this thing that came with Retro Stalker. You see, it looks goofy with Stalker, but actually looks kind of at home with the Slayer. There is one last accessory I want to give the Slayer, though.
What, behind the rabbit?
It is the rabbit.
If you're unfamiliar with Doom lore, there is a reason the Slayer's sole purpose in life is to relentlessly exterminate every single being in hell. And that's because long ago the forces of hell invaded his Earth and mercilessly killed his pet bunny Daisy, and his entire family, but Daisy was the tipping point. Plus in Doom Eternal you can find this epic painting of the Slayer and Daisy in the Fortress of Doom. Gang, I think you know what needs to be done, and it involves this wabbit.
Just what I always wanted, my own little bunny rabbit.
These are really well designed 1/12 scale 3D printed resin rabbits made for dollhouse miniatures. They just need to be painted. Daisy here was painted using a variety of washes, glazes, and dry brushing colors to give the fur that fuzzy-wuzzy 3D appearance that rabbits have. There, at long last the Slayer has been reunited with his pet bunny Daisy, and they can continue to slaughter the entirety of demonkind forever.
Isn't that special?
Though the Slayer is a good figure overall, I do have some issues with it. The most annoying of which for me is his arm blade. The extended one fits in the slot just fine, but the retracted one is very loose and has trouble staying put. Not sure if this is a common issue, but it's an issue that mine had. I'm not a huge fan of how fragile some of the parts of this figure are, especially the shoulder cannon. Posing this is more nerve-wracking than defusing a bomb.
I feel like I'm gonna break this damn thing.
Everything else is just cosmetics and nitpicks. For example, the shoulder joints are not that great looking, but based on how much range they give the arms, yeah, I can excuse the appearance. This is, however, a very easy toy line to complete. You know how many figures they made for Doom Eternal? 1.
What?
Yeah, that's honestly a shame, since the Slayer by himself is nice, but would be so much nicer with something to fight. I will admit that's where McFarlane has a leg up on Figma, because he was at least thoughtful enough to make a Marauder. Except it's 7-inch scale, so you couldn't put it with the Figma Slayer if you wanted to.
Ugh, god damn it.
Another option is to use some imagination, in which case he can encounter another demon-slaying character and destroy demonic forces and creatures from neither of their figure lines.
Now is the time. 2 titans meet, as it was written.
Probably in celebration for the new upcoming game Doom the Dark Ages, Figma is actually re-releasing this figure, so the Slayer is once again available for pre-order. Short story long here, gang. If you're a Doom fan, this is a good investment. If you're a really big Doom fan, I encourage you to fire up the old imagination and give him some worthy adversaries to battle. I know I've got some Doom projects planned for the future.
You get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!